Hello and good afternoon to all of you as you join us at our second Achates live session this afternoon on the 7th of April. I'm just waiting for people to join us as we speak. I'm keeping an eye on the live stream. I can see people joining as I speak. It's currently a few minutes to 2 by my calculations. We will hold on for a couple more minutes. So just going to keep saying hi to everyone. Do give me a wave as you join. Feel free to say something on the chat as you come in. It's lovely to see you all this afternoon, on this lovely sunny afternoon. I'm hoping that the people that had decided to stream their garden a couple of doors down from my house have decided to stop now, because I hope that's not going to interrupt our session this afternoon. We're looking forward to welcoming Nadia El-Sabai from Arab British Centre and Matthew Swan from City of London Sinfonia this afternoon to our chat. They will be in conversation with our Director of Development, Kane Moore. And we are talking this afternoon about developing digital engagement. So we've had a lot of questions, obviously, over the last couple of weeks about how can you move your donor communications online? What do good digital donor communications look like? How can you make sure you're maintaining a presence, keeping a conversation going with your donors, your participants, whoever it is you need to talk to? Obviously, particularly at Achates Philanthropy, we've got a specialism in fundraising. So that's our focus for today's session, as ever. But obviously, if you have got wider questions, then do bring them to the table. It may be that we can't directly answer those today, but I think it's, for us, these sessions are very much about a platform for people to engage, to meet, to have conversations with us and with each other. We have a certain amount of knowledge, obviously, we have a good level of sector oversight, and we do work across the sector, across theatre, dance, music, visual arts, essentially all art forms. So we do have a broad understanding of what's happening right across the sector. So that's what we're trying to bring to you with these sessions. I can see Georgia there saying hello. Hello, Georgia. It's lovely to see you here today. So where was I? Yes, I was just saying that we have a lovely oversight of the sector. So what we're hoping is that we can bring you some of the insights we have from our learning and understanding, but also from our partners' understanding. That's particularly why we've invited Nadia and Matthew to speak today, because we've seen some of the work they've been doing over the last few weeks, and think it's always a good idea to share best practice, good examples of what's happening across the sector. I can see our lovely director, Caroline McCormick, has joined. Hello, Caroline, nice to see you again. I think we're going to start with the session proper shortly. There's a few more people that we're waiting to join. So do just bear with us for a few moments longer before we start the session proper. Don't worry, you'll know when it started properly. I will actually start saying something slightly more sensible and practiced, I hope. Just keeping this going for the time being while we allow everyone to join. So do give me a wave, come and say hello. So I'm not talking into the ether by myself. We've got a very interesting list this morning. About 100 people have, this afternoon, about 100 people have signed up for the session this afternoon. So the session is going to be, for those of you that were with us last time, the session is going to have a very similar format as it did last time. So we will have, I will introduce the session and I will introduce our Achates Philanthropy speaker and our guests for this afternoon. I will then hand over to them. At the end of the initial conversation between Kane, Nadia and Matthew, we will take some questions from you. So if you do have questions, particularly around this topic, hi Lisa, it's good to see you here. So if you do have any questions around this topic or wider fundraising concerns, particularly at the moment around COVID-19, what that means for you, what that means for your organisation and for the sector more widely, then do bring those to the table. As I say, we know, hello Margot, we know that this is a live situation, things are changing, certainly from our perspective, we're seeing quite a lot of changes still day by day. Hello there, Liana, good to see you. So yeah, what we're seeing at the moment is that things are changing across the sector quite rapidly still day by day. We're hoping that over the next week or two, things do settle down. So there may be some questions that we can't answer directly today. Hello, Anna, it's lovely to see you. There may be some questions that we can't answer directly today, but if we can't answer something directly, then we can keep the conversation going. This video will stay live for a while. You can always contact us on info@achatesphilanthropy.com. So if you have asked a question and we haven't been able to answer it today, do drop us a line at the Achates address. Hello to Sarah and to Caroline Harris. Good to see you here. So yeah, do feel free to drop us a line over at the Achates address if we haven't been able to answer questions today, or if you've got a slightly wider topic that you'd like to discuss. We are, as always, taking your ideas on the sessions that you would like to see next, what the topics are that are particularly on your mind, how you would like to frame conversations, if there's anything particularly interesting you've seen that's happening in the sector, or any insight that you can add, then do just drop us a line. We always love to hear other people's opinions and ideas and see what's happening across the sector. Hello to all, there's quite a few more people joined. Hi, Amani and Tash and Barty. It's good to see you all. I think we're going to start in with the session proper fairly shortly. We've got nearly half of our people joined now. So we will switch to the more formal part of the session. It is lovely. So Caroline McCormick's just saying on the chat, it's lovely to see so many friends old and new. It absolutely is. One of the things I found really lovely about these sessions today, obviously this is the second one we've done, is what we're seeing is a really lovely mixture of our existing networks, people that we've known for some time, but also a lot of people that are quite new to us. Hello, Isabel, and hello, Vicky. It's really nice to see so many people that we have not worked with before, organisations that are new to us. And it's lovely to see the sector coming together. I think one of the things I've been really encouraged by over the last few weeks is seeing what's happening in terms of partnerships, people coming together, joint responses, considered responses to the current crisis. I think we're all here because we believe the arts are useful, powerful, and interesting, and that they're needed. I think particularly at times of crisis and emergency like this, the arts are even more needed than usual to keep communities connected, to share our experiences is even more important at the moment. So I think I'm going to, so just a couple more hellos, people coming in. So hello to Sarah and Rebecca and Rose. Good to see you here today. We're really delighted to be doing this second Achates Philanthropy live online session today. Thank you all for joining us. I am going to start with the more formal part of the session now. So here is my formal hello from Achates Philanthropy. My name is Kerrian. I'm the Achates Director. I'm the Executive Director of Achates Philanthropy, and I'm very pleased to meet you all here today on YouTube for our second in our series of Achates Live online sessions. The first session was 2 weeks ago. We've now had over 300 views for that session. So thank you so much for all for viewing that, and thank you for joining us here today. I think similarly to a lot of you, we are quite new to live streaming. We're new to a lot of the technology that we're using. So if there are any technical hitches today, do please send us a note in the chat if you're having any problems, and we will try our best to try and sort those out. Obviously, we are not IT specialists, so we're doing our best. So please forgive us if there are any technical hitches today. Today's session is going to be run by our Director of Development, Kane Moore. Kane, if you could just say hi and give everyone a wave.
Hello, everyone.
Great, thank you, Kane. Joining Kane today will be Nadia El Sabeh of Arab British Centre. Nadia, can you give us a wave, please? Great, I think we saw Nadia there, I'm not too sure. And then finally,
sorry.
There she was, brilliant.
Nice to see you.
Nadia.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And then finally joining us today, we have Matthew Swan of City of London Symphonia. Matthew, can you give us a wave? Great.
You need to say something at the same time.
Great. I hope you will have seen Matthew's there. Fantastic. Joining, well, there may be some technical hitches here. We're doing what we can. Joining us later on at the end of the session, we're going to have Liv Nielsen from Spectrix, who is going to be delivering our first Achates Philanthropy Prize Golden Nugget from prize partners Spectrix. I'll give you a little bit more about that later on. So similar to the format of the last session, we will have Kane will be speaking. There will be some conversation with Nadia and Matthew. There will then be a chance for you to ask questions. So if you have any questions, do just ask them in the little questions box. I can see some of you are using that at the moment, so that's great. But do just put any questions that you have in there, and I will ask those questions of Kane, Matthew and Nadia at the end of the session. I think that is all for now. So I'm going to hand over to Kane for now, and I will see you shortly. If you have any questions, do just keep asking them as we work through the session, and I will pick those up as swiftly as I can. So thank you so much. Over to Kane.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on developing digital relationships. Okay. So back in 2015, I was heading up fundraising at Battersea Arts Centre and coming to the end of the campaign for the redevelopment of our 19th century former town hall, when on one fateful Friday in March, a catastrophic fire broke out which gutted our main theatre, the Grand Hall, and the rest of our building was spared by a hair. We responded fast. We set up an emergency fundraising campaign the same evening, and within the first 72 hours had been in contact with all our main funders. They, with one exception, and like many of the major trusts who signed the London Funders Network COVID-19 statement, agreed to lift the restrictions on their grant and direct their giving to where most needed. We phoned everyone who had booked a ticket to a show in the Grand Hall. And as had been the case with the current emergency, the majority donated their ticket fee. In our communications with our supporters, by email, on our website and on social media, we strive to be open and honest about the issues we faced, but also positive about how we were rising to the challenge and tackling it head on. We worked with Gecko, whose show had just opened in the Grand Hall at the time of the fire, to get their production, admittedly without set, as that had burnt, rehoused at the South Bank Centre for a series of free performances. We were transparent about how support would be used, not towards the rebuild, which would be covered by our insurers, but in making up the loss in earnings of having our main space out of bounds for 5 years. We kept things personal. We did away with e-newsletters, too corporate, not personal enough. And instead, most of our communications were in the voice of and signed off by our artistic director, David Jubb. We got really, really good at mail merge. Across our messaging, we reiterated the importance of our community. We encouraged our audience to share their memories of the Grand Hall and use this to build up a digital archive. We said thank you a lot. We celebrated the ways in which our community came together at such a challenging time. We celebrated the small gestures as much as the big gifts. We replied to every email. And on the anniversary of the fire, we sent out 3,000 handwritten postcards to everyone who donated. Today's situation is in no ways a direct comparison, but I still think there are some core lessons that do translate to today. With all venues forced to close, it is not an emergency impacting a single organisation, but one that reverberates across the entire sector, facing a significant and unprecedented loss of income. We've all had to make really difficult decisions about furloughing our staff so as to just about keep our heads above water. Most of us are now working under increasingly challenging circumstances, with just a skeleton crew to help us pull through during this closure period. I want to start by addressing the question of whether, at this time and with so many people under financial pressure, it is even appropriate to ask for donations. I would say that it is, but with a clear caveat. You need to show how you are supporting your communities in this difficult time. The argument needs to be more nuanced than simply focused on saving your organisation. We all deliver incredibly important work that is around engaging some of the hardest to reach groups, transforming lives through culture and creativity, and inspiring the next generations of young creatives. And at the same time, our sector is built upon the talent and creativity of the many artists and freelancers who have seen all of their work collapse overnight and are most likely to fall through the net when it comes to the financial aid they can access. Now more than ever, there is a need to demonstrate, to borrow the phrasing from the Kalous-Gulbenkian Foundation, the civic role of arts organisations. It is really easy, taking into account the financial pressure we are all under, to pause our activity until the lockdown lifts and to focus on how we will rebuild our programmes and audiences when we can, if we can, reopen. Where possible, however, I would implore you to think creatively about how you can continue to support your communities within a digital context. Now, there's some great examples of organisations who are already doing this. Later, you will hear from both the Arab British Centre and City of London Symphonia about how they are rising to the challenge. And it'd be great for you to share in the comments what you're all doing. To pull a few examples, Yard Theatre, for example, in Hackney, has moved all its drama and youth clubs for young people online. Cardboard Citizens have started to trial virtual workshops to ensure that they remain connected with their members who have experiences of homelessness, with a guest appearance by their ambassador, David Morrissey, at their first. Company 3, who spoke alongside me at my previous session on regular giving, moved quickly to launch the Coronavirus Time Capsule, a new project through which they are working in collaboration with their own youth company and other youth companies across the world to create a cumulative video time capsule, recording teenage experiences during the coronavirus pandemic. Little Angel Theatre have used Facebook to host a series of daily puppetry making workshops and storytelling sessions. And Writing West Midlands have launched picture book author events online, commissioning picture book authors and illustrators to host book readings and activity sessions for children, teachers, parents, and carers. At the same time, others are looking at how they can continue to commission artists. Home Manchester, for example, launched a new additional commissioning programme for theatre and live art makers to create new work at home within days of having to close their building. Whilst many organisations are using social media and their e-communications to point artists and creatives in the direction of financial support, organisations like Beat Freaks and the National Centre for Writing have initiated online consultations to take the temperature of what support is needed and to build their digital programmes in response. Thinking of how you can make a simple and targeted offer to your community and audiences, I would argue, is so important in being able to fundraise effectively at this time. Those who do rise to the challenge and step up their digital activity in meaningful and innovative ways are going to place themselves in the best position going forward. With many key funders offering flexibility at this time in how their funding is directed, there is an opportunity to start a dialogue about redirecting some of their giving to such initiatives, particularly where they can be shown to support the vulnerable and those experiencing hardship and isolation as a result of COVID-19. Indeed, starting to test and pilot such programs will, I would argue, be important in making your case for emergency funding from Arts Council, where the priority is both on preventing organisations from having to close down and delivery of new digital and online activities. Balancing your fundraising activity on not just keeping your organisation open, but also in indicating and celebrating what this support means in developing new ways of supporting your communities creates a far more compelling ask. Both the Roundhouse and Kiln Theatre serve as really good examples in directly stating that the requests for donations they are making means that they can continue to support young people and rework their creative engagement. Looking beyond the cultural sector for the moment, I also think there is a lot that can be learned from the restaurant industry in how they have directed crowdfunding campaigns around feeding the NHS, getting food to the most vulnerable, and supporting food banks, and have also encouraged their communities to support by buying credit vouchers for when they reopen. At the same time as building and rapidly testing a simple and focused offer, you should be working collaboratively with your communications team to build around a 12-week communications campaign spanning the closure period, which could then be extended or reduced as required. Where previously fundraising messaging had to vie for space alongside the push to promote shows and sell tickets, with productions and live events curtailed, there is an opportunity to realign communications over this period and hopefully beyond to developing your audience's understanding of the work your organisation does, and to shine light on the talent development and learning and participation activity that many of your audiences and some of your supporters may be learning about for the first time. As I discussed in one of my previous Achates Live workshops on individual giving at the Old Vic, it is important to recognise that your donors and audiences are not a single homogenous group. They have different interests and priorities behind why they are drawn to your organisation. One group of donors might have a passionate belief in the intrinsic value of arts and in supporting groundbreaking and innovative artists, dancers, musicians, or theatre makers, whilst another will be drawn to culture's instrumental value, in how the arts transforms the lives of, for example, at-risk young people or isolated older people, or breaks down barriers for underrepresented and diverse groups. In noting this, you should map out how these communications, both over email and on your own website and on social media, are curated by theme, reflecting what you know about the different interests of your audience and supporter segments. One, for example, could focus on how you are nurturing the next generation of young creatives, incorporating interviews with the creatives you have worked with, showcasing short video performances they've made, and profiling how you've started to adapt your programs to a new digital context. Another could look at how a recent production or exhibition is put together, featuring interviews with the creative team to give behind-the-scenes insights into the creative process. None of this content needs to be particularly polished. Rough and ready is fine, and in fact, I would encourage it. Use your smartphone. Where possible, include subtitles to ensure what you're putting out is accessible. What is essential, and this reflects what I learned running Battersea Art Centre's campaign following the fire, is that the tone of communication is warm, positive, and personal, and reflects the personality and style of your organisation, whilst bearing in mind the difficult situations people are living through. They should show solidarity for your community and the wider cultural sector. Incorporate information on how to give, but also other ways in which they can support. Encourage people to get in touch with you and your team. These communications are not just about sharing information. They are about starting a dialogue. If members of your team have been volunteering for the NHS or other local relief services, do highlight this. Similarly, be generous and champion what the arts and creatives you work with and the other cultural sector organisations you close to are doing. At the same time, look at how you can share what Caroline rather beautifully described in the last session as curated moments of joy that your donors, supporters, and audiences look forward to, share, and make them feel special. Now, this isn't about you referring audiences to existing content on your website or uncurated archives, but creating a simple, regular digital program that is free to access. This is a key time when arts organisations can distinguish themselves by the way they engage with audiences when they are most in need of entertainment, diversion, and moments of transformation that arts and culture brings. There are already some great examples out there of how organisations are diving into their archives to create watch parties of past productions. Belarus Free Theatre, for example, who have long rehearsed and created new productions over Skype, so are fully aware of how to manage technology at this point, have curated a programme of 24 of their shows, which they'll be streaming over YouTube through April through to June. At the same time, they've involved a cast of their celebrity ambassadors, including Samuel West and Stephen Fry, to read some of their favourite fairy tales. Taking online their free Friday Jazz Lines gigs, Town Hall Symphony Hall have launched a programme of Friday jazz watch parties on Facebook, with the first few of these specially recorded in their concert hall just prior to it closing. Many other organisations are running brilliant live workshops and Q&As through conferencing platforms like Zoom. The great thing about this public programme, particularly where it might involve celebrity ambassadors and advocates, is it's starting to attract new and different digital audiences to cultural organisations and venues, and also being amplified through the mainstream press, who are showcasing examples to celebrate how the cultural sector is staying relevant and engaged even when closed. Now, whilst I would not advocate for placing any of this content behind any type of paywall, I would strongly recommend that clear, light touch call outs for support are embedded within this content. This is not simply about referring audiences to your website if they want to support. If possible, you should be topping and tailing content with a direct to camera ask being clear, as already discussed, about what their support could enable. Now, from a technical standpoint, you can easily embed a donate button into Facebook Live and integrate PayPal giving at the point of attendees registering on Zoom. But I would also probably just steer clear of YouTube, as their donate button seems to currently only be available to charities registered in the US. Within the sector, the majority of our efforts are directed towards face-to-face relationships, face-to-face and relationship fundraising. In the current context, it's about shifting these relationships online and making them work remotely. With both your current supporters and the new donors that may come to you over this period, regardless of the size of gift, it is about starting a dialogue. With new donors, make sure to say thank you, not just through an automated process at the point of giving, but a more personal and bespoke follow-up a few days or weeks down the line, which also starts to signpost the ways in which they can convert a one-off donation to regular support. For all of your supporters, map out fortnightly communications that sit alongside your wider communications campaign and might consist of emails, phone calls, even letters. At Battersea Arts Centre, we used mail merge so that all our supporter updates came from our artistic director's personal account. What was really heartening was that so many recipients responded directly to them. And finally, I would start to be planning now a special way of commemorating and celebrating the support you receive over this period. I think I'm going to stop speaking at this point. I think that's probably enough from me. And I now want to bring Matthew Swan, who is Chief Executive of City of London Sinfonia, and Nadia El Sabai, who's Executive Director of Arab British Centre, to give a little bit of an overview about how they are responding to COVID-19. Matthew, can I start with you? Can you give me a little bit of an introduction about City of London Sinfonia and how COVID-19 has impacted your activity already?
Hi, everybody. I hope everyone's safe and well. Yes, we're an orchestra. We're a chamber orchestra, so we perform in and around London. But actually, a huge focus of our work is work with groups that are actually already very socially isolated, even before the current situation was around. So we work a lot in mental health with young people with quite severe psychiatric illnesses. We work with very young children, quite often in socially isolated groupings. We work a lot with people with dementia diagnoses, and right across the board. That's a big part of our work, and a big part of that actually is relying on our musicians' creativity. I think orchestral musicians in the UK are wonderful, but they do have a reputation of being a kind of sit down, shut up, and play the dots in front of you. And our musicians are wonderful in the sense that they really bring a great sense of creativity and co-creational creativity to all the work that they do. And of course, that relies on being very close to your audience and your participants, and none of that can happen in person at the moment. So the first thing we started actually was a version of our regular relaxed concerts, which our musicians curate and create and perform themselves and direct themselves from a theatrical perspective that we normally do with the Albany Theatre in Lewisham, and putting those online as solo performances in a way where there's an activity related to that. So if you're at home with a 3-year-old or an older child that maybe has got a sensory impairment, or you're caring for an older adult who's living with dementia, there's a very simple way of interacting with the musician live then and there. I think there's a plethora of very, very good and very well produced online content already out there that a lot of people are using, but it's not live. And I think that's the great beauty of the arts, and that's the thing that people are missing at the moment, and that we're hoping that Comfortable Classical at Home will plug at least some of that gap.
Thank you, Matthew. Nadia, can you just give a bit of an introduction about Arab British Centre, and maybe talk a little bit about how you started to reach your audiences and the groups that you serve online?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me today. I hope you're well. So the Arab British Centre is a cultural centre. We have a physical premises based in the City of London. And from our premises, we provide subsidised office space to charities and non-profit organisations working with a sort of shared mission to us, which is to further understanding of the Arab world in the UK. So all the organisations that sort of work in Arab-British relations in various forms. We also, from our premises, provide resources for the public. So we teach courses related to or informed by the Arab world, so such as Arabic language. We have a very popular music school that runs 3 days a week, teaching oud and other Arab music literacy, for example. And we have a cultural program that we run sort of across the country, nationwide, with partner organisations. So in this situation, we've had to sort of respond quite quickly, cancel a lot of our programming, which was very disappointing, right up until, including a cultural exchange program we were running in Kuwait. We should be in Kuwait at the moment, actually, with an exhibition and a group of British artists and institutions from Glasgow, Belfast, Wales, and the north of England. So, moving online was very much a reaction, as wasn't really planned. We were in the midst of our course, our sort of term time, with our Arabic courses starting. In fact, the day that we decided to close, we had Arabic students walking in, and my colleague had to meet them at the door and say, "You can come in today, but you can't come back." So we had to move those courses online, and they responded really well. And it was a complete test for us, but it's been fantastic. So teaching Arabic went well. We even moved some of our music courses online, and it was a bit of a test at first. Some students didn't really like it, and we've deferred their course till later in the year, and that's fine. But also from the day we closed, we were like, well, we have, let's just experiment. So we closed on a Wednesday. On Friday, on Thursday, we said, tomorrow let's host a hangout, and we'll just invite everyone to come and hang out with us. We build it as an informal event. People could join us at lunchtime, bring their lunch, bring a cup of tea, talk to us about arts and culture from the Arab world. And it was hugely popular. We had over 100 signups. We had to close the sign-up. So we were like, okay, this is what people want. So we've developed our online offer sort of through trial and error. And we're now continuing with these sort of Friday hangouts where we host an artist from the region to sort of join us. And we're also continuing with our courses, and we've developed some workshops and sort of webinars that we can run with people as well. But definitely sort of echoing what Matthew said, I think the live element has really worked for us.
Thank you. And Nadia, just sort of to pull on your point, I mean, might make it sound a little bit like we had a huge plan at Battersea Arts Centre when we were running the campaign after the fire, but it was very much intuition and just moving as fast as we can and testing things out. I was just wondering, do you think, does it matter that it's not polished, that what you're putting out there is a bit sort of trial and error-y, a bit rough around the edges?
I think initially no, and I think people appreciate it. I mean, when we build our first event as an experiment, and we were like, we are just join us and we'll see what happens. And I think people felt really comfortable with that, and it made it a bit more informal. People were chatting to us, they were giving us tips. This is how you use Zoom. This is how you, it was so I think initially that was very much appreciated, and I think people are going to be much more flexible with us as well over the next few months. But we are thinking, as an organization, we're looking 3 months, well, we're really looking up until September now for our sort of digital offer, because we've cleared all of our programs up until then. So I think we do have time to think about, to sort of use this learning from the first 2 weeks, and sort of, as we said at the beginning, hopefully the dust will settle over the next few weeks and we'll realize sort of what works for us and what doesn't.
And Matthew, just to bring you in again, so the real risk as I see it at the moment is that a lot of the digital content that is being put out is sort of just reaching and sort of preaching to the converted, I guess, a little bit. It's reaching a digitally connected and culturally savvy audience. How have you made sure the work that you're doing is hitting the right people?
I think that's a very good point. I think there's a lot of digital content that's quite questionable out there, and people are doing things online just to be seen to be doing things. And if you try and compete with the BBC or Sky or Netflix or even the National Theatre, in most cases you're going to lose every time. And it's interesting what Nadia's just said about it. It doesn't have to be perfect right at the start. It's something that we needed to do quickly. We needed to react. We needed to say to people that need the creative interaction that we bring, we are here from you and we're doing something. So it's quite nice, actually. I think most of us in the arts spend our lives being paranoid that this brilliant idea we'll have cannot fail. We can't possibly fail. It's just not allowed in the arts. But with this, actually, we could get a couple of things wrong. It didn't matter. There's time to build it up, as Nadia said. You know, the first couple of weeks you're testing things. Sorry, Kane, just remind me of the original question. I've gone off on a tangent, I realise.
It's about how you make sure you're hitting the right people.
Yeah, I think as an orchestra, we're in a wonderful position in that our business is our musicians. They are absolutely the core of what we're doing. And we work with a lot of social care and healthcare partners and a lot of artistic partners, actually, who don't have that connection to creatives and artists. And I think that the thing that we've really concentrated very hard on, as well as a social media presence and our existing audiences that we've got on mailing lists and so on, is saying to even places as big as the South Bank Centre or as small as and beautifully small as the Albany, but also the care home providers, the hospitals, the psychiatric units, the music education hubs that we work with that don't have the means to create content and interactive content like that. That's been a huge part of what we've done. And wider than that, I mean, you know, I've even got my dad, who's a school governor, on the case. You know, we've all got connections like this. This is the time to use every single social media grouping you've got, but in a clever way. It's not just scattergun. You're saying, can you send that to the school that you're governor of in Seacroft in East Leeds, which is one of the sort of most deprived areas of the north of England, you know, and they're all watching it now. So there are very simple ways of doing that, but it's got to be targeted.
Nadia, with you, I know we've spoken before about how, you know, particularly the Q&A sessions that you've been hosting have been reaching a new audience. And do you think you're hitting the right community? Are there people that you're not engaging with at the moment, but you should be?
I mean, it's a really good question, and I guess it's the problem with sort of digital communications that we have generally, because we're a really small organization, and we do rely heavily on our social media, the different platforms we run on social media, and our newsletter. I think we are hitting a big portion of that community that we want to hit. I mean, the work that we do is very much UK focused, so we're trying to connect people in the UK with people across the Middle East, and we do that through culture and art. So it's usually sort of artists and audiences in the UK. We are reaching, I mean, to my great surprise, I mean, there are people signing into our Hangouts and our Q&As from the US, from Singapore, from Australia, Italy. Like, we never intended to reach those people, but it's been fantastic. And I think that's, it's been a real bonus. We do everything in English. The primary purpose is that so that we're accessible to audiences in the UK. That does mean that there are even audiences in the UK who probably aren't so comfortable in English and would like to see things, you know, from us in Arabic language. I think our different social media channels do reach different groups, and we do work a lot in partnership with other organisations, including societies, sort of like British Tunisian societies or Anglo-Egyptian societies, who will also share with their communities. So, but I think, you know, we need to sort of think about this a little bit more, about how we reach more people, and hopefully over the next few weeks, we can develop those networks even further.
And Nadia, what do you see? I mean, what do you as an organisation see as the positives coming out of this sort of forced moment of downtime, both in terms of your strategy and for the wider sector and for the other organisations you're connected to?
I mean, of course, like the situation is awful. I mean, it is terrible for so many people. But there are definitely opportunities for us. I mean, this was supposed to be a really big year for us, programming wise. We sort of been building up our programming year on year, and we had, you know, a lot of international activity taking place this year, which has been cancelled. Um, that said, we do, you know, we the downtime means that we're not constantly running on a treadmill and sort of going from the next thing to the next thing. Also, owning and sort of running our building means that we're very much sucked into the sort of day-to-day building management, which we haven't been so much over this period. So I mean, we had already, and we've been working with you guys on our sort of fundraising strategy, and that was something that we'd set aside time, and we have more of that time now to really think that through. We're really thinking right through now till the end of 2021, and it's giving us an opportunity to think, you know, what we're going to look like, and inevitably we're going to be different on the other side of this. And you know, it's too soon now to think what that's going to be, but we have this we sort of, you know, we're talking every day, we're thinking through, you know, the plans in our strategy, sort of 5-year plan are definitely changing. So we have this time to think about what that's going to be like.
And Matthew, is City of London Symphonia going to be a different beast coming out of this? Is the classical music sector going to be changed as a result of all of this?
Yes, City of London Symphony will definitely be a different beast. I keep using words like advantage and opportunity when talking about the current situation, and they're horrible words to use. But what we've been able to leverage in this time is setting up some conversations with our musicians about how we push that creative edge further and how we involve our audiences much more in what we do. I think there's going to be a huge mental well-being and health crisis on the other side of this, which is kind of brewing worryingly at the moment. And the more we can do to help that, not just in the vulnerable groups that we work with, but in a general audience perspective, the better. And the one thing that we never have time to do is talk to our musicians, because they're freelance and they all want to do it. But then if you get a commercial session or some teaching work, you're always going to take that because you're only as good as your last gig. So that actually is there's a bit of a golden window from that perspective. I think the classical music sector is going to be very different. I fear that it will be smaller, although that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's already a couple of the kind of service providers or suppliers in the industry have fallen over. Some artist agents have gone. I'm sure that's the same in other performing arts areas as well. And I think some organisations that are reliant on a lot of international touring, I can't see that getting back up and going until well into next calendar year. But what we're doing, we're working with two partners, Orchestras Live, who are our development agency within the sector, and also our trade body, the Association of British Orchestras. And we were leading with some of this work anyway, but actually getting to grips with what the sector is doing in health and social care, because there isn't really a clear picture of that. We've done some work with Orchestras Live about best practice with orchestral work with older audiences in participation settings, but we don't really know what we're doing in terms of not just social prescribing in the primary care sense, but actually a lot of orchestras are very adept at working in quite acute settings, and there's no way of knowing exactly who's doing what, how much money is being invested, what research is out there. That the information is very disparate at the moment. So emergency funding from Arts Council England allowing, we will be focusing on that work as we move towards the end of April and into May and June, because although a lot of staff have been furloughed, generally the directors of participation or learning engagement have remained in post. And it's a wonderful opportunity to speak to, again, a cohort of people who are usually far too busy to concentrate on something like that.
And do you think you could be doing more in terms of supporting that wider community of freelance musicians who've seen their work fall through?
Yes, I mean, we've done some very specific things for our musicians because the government's scheme around support for self-employed people has been announced. A lot of the detail hasn't, and a lot of musicians and artists are looking at that and thinking, I don't understand, I don't know what to do. So the first thing we did was make sure that we organised a session with our accountants who do a lot of self-employed accountancy. So they had, I think, over 2 hours in the end of just firing questions at our accountant, trying to get to the bottom of this. That actually drew out a couple of issues, which I was then able to take to the Association of British Orchestras, who passed it on to DCMS, around people being unfairly punished because they maybe had a year when they had maternity or paternity leave and they're self-employed, or they were injured, so unable to play. And in one case, someone was learning to adapt to a visual impairment and had 9 months to a year when she earned very little. We supported her through that as much as we could, but it was interesting to see how that came through. And I think also the skilling up of musicians as well in this time, and giving them a greater sense of why we are doing things rather than just going from gig to participation session to recording session to teaching on this kind of constant treadmill, to borrow Nadia's phrase, and giving them the opportunity to reassess where they are and what their creative priorities are.
And Nadia, how are you working to support the wider community of Arab British artists and your own resident companies during this point?
I mean, I think we're still gearing up to like sort of present what that offer is going to be like. I mean, at the moment we've done quite a few workshops, classes, and sort of live Q&As with artists. And we're doing about 2 or 3 a week at the moment, and of course we're paying them. So where they may have lost sort of income from things that they were planning with us, we've sort of managed to like shift that over, and we've now planned in new things as well. We are looking at sort of presenting a more comprehensive sort of package, so people can so that we can offer sort of a better digital program with artists sort of working from home. Last year we started working with artists. It was our first year really looking at sort of commissioning new work, and we did 12 new commissions, and that was really successful for us, and we want to continue to do that throughout this year despite this situation. With our resident organisations, that's we have 7 organisations who are based in our building. They don't pay rent, but they do pay towards service charges, and we will be sort of looking at cutting that down, and also offering those who need maybe more help how we can sort of support with their sort of the physical infrastructure around their organisation. But also I think just sort of these events, sort of promoting people's work, signposting people to support, just as Matthew said. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're just figuring out in terms of how we can apply for relief from the council and things like that, and we're sharing all of those with our network. So, but hopefully over the next few weeks that will look a little bit more solid.
Okay, it's the last question before we're going to throw it back to Carrie to take comments from the audience. Just wondering if both of you, are you staying in touch with your supporters during this period? And are you and should you be asking for money? Matthew, do you want to go first?
Yes. Sorry, I'll elaborate.
Very brief.
Yeah. No, we have to. I mean, I'm sure, like everybody else, income from other sources has just fallen off a cliff. All our hired engagements for the summer, including a £500,000 opera season that we normally do every year with Opera Holland Park, which may yet be postponed, but it's all not coming in. It's not happening. And obviously, some funders, trust and foundation funders, have just completely shut up shop. Thankfully, others haven't. So we've been looking at how we communicate with our funders, particularly individual funders, where they're not being proactive, and saying to them, we're not asking for money to stop us from falling over. We're asking for that as well, but what we're asking for money is to make sure that our musicians can continue to be creative with the very vulnerable groups that we work with. And I think that's the key thing. And then there's probably a secondary ask as we go into sort of 2 or 3 weeks down the line about how we change that argument into, we need to look about what we're going to be when we all come out of this. I think while we're having those conversations within the artistic world at the moment, a lot of people aren't quite ready to sort of think about what happens when concerts or work in schools gets going again in August or September. People are still feeling a little bit raw perhaps, but we'll move that argument over time, partly because Comfortable Classical will be up and running, it is up and running, and we're hoping to get other products around mindfulness up and running as well over the next 2 or 3 weeks. So yes and yes, in summary.
And Nadia, what about you? Should you be asking for money?
Should we be asking for money? Yeah. So we are. We've had a few discussions about this. We are currently not asking for money, but we should be asking for money, and we will be. We had a big. I mean, I think as this is so new, we've agreed amongst the team and our board that this free offer is actually an opportunity. We're engaging with people probably on very different levels, maybe more than ever. I mean, people are sort of attending our sort of online events, they're writing into us, they're giving us feedback, and I think we're really appreciating that sort of increased outreach. So I think at the moment, whilst we're still in such these sort of choppy waters at uncertain times and people are sort of enjoying our content, we're happy for it to be like that. But we are planning to, I think, just as you said at the beginning, Kane, we need to sort of get that message really consistent and to sort of have that across everything that we do. So once we have that across our website, the sort of donate buttons where people sign in, some of our activities are sort of workshops and webinars. I mean, we're not going to put that necessarily behind a paywall, but we would expect people to sort of a pay as you feel approach to those activities. So we will be sort of cultivating that message and making sure that our audience is aware and how they can support and what that will go towards.
Thank you, Nadia. Kerry-Ann, can I hand it back to you to see if we've had any questions from the audience?
Absolutely. Thank you. Sorry, I realised it wasn't on there. There we go, I'm back. So thank you so much, Kane. Yes, we've seen some quite interesting conversations happening on the YouTube chat this afternoon. So we're going to take it back a little way. The first question we had in was from Amina at East London Dance, who asks a really interesting question around the danger of creating too much digital content. Is there ever an argument for staying away from the digital world at the moment? I think particularly as everyone's jumped into the digital world and is creating content exactly as we talked about this afternoon, is there ever a rationale at the moment for not jumping in straight away, for waiting, for holding off and not creating content? I think, Matthew, you had a response on this one.
Yes, I think I covered some of this a little earlier, but I think there's an argument for not creating too much content. And it goes back to that thing of being very targeted, because there is a danger that everyone thinks, oh, well, it's fine, we'll just put old concerts or theatre productions up on the web. Actually, one of the conversations we had with a board member was very interesting. She'd not really engaged with Netflix before, but in the sort of downtime had started to get into Netflix box sets because it was something to do. And she'd noticed that she was then becoming far less forgiving of things that arts organisations had done that were pre-records or existing content where the quality wasn't as high as what she was seeing on the BBC or Netflix or things like that. So I think there is a danger that we just flood people's inboxes and social media feeds with, look at this that we did, or, I mean, in my world, the orchestral world, every orchestra in the world has done a look at us all play individually to create this 3-minute overture. Isn't it clever? Yes, it is clever. I don't know what it means. It means absolutely nothing as far as I can tell. Sorry, when you booked me, you did realise I would be quite sort of, anyway. So yeah, I think too much digital content is bad. No digital content is worse though. But I think it's about that targeting and looking and saying, okay, general audiences have plenty of choice actually at the moment, but there are audiences that are desperate for that interaction and really need that at the moment. And I think that's where the arts world can actually do far better than some of the big players in the digital field.
Matthew, I have to say, I absolutely agree with that. I think there is a big difference between the content that we're seeing from the big players, so from the the national theatres, the Royal Opera houses, and then obviously the digital providers that are always there, like Netflix, etc. I completely agree that from smaller arts organisations, people are looking for targeted content. They're looking for things that are personal, and they're looking for that connection. And I completely agree. That's exactly what the arts can provide at the moment. And I think it's something that's really important. I think the thing that I've been talking to a lot of the clients that I work with at Achates Philanthropy about is about how visible things are at the moment. I think it's quite easy to forget how visible we are, because we're all, even this conversation, we're all sat in our own homes, in our own spaces with our laptops. But I think that things are being noticed, that people are taking note of what's happening across the sector. There's a lot of conversations around comparisons of the content that people provide and the types of engagement that we're seeing, which was one of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation today, was particularly around having a conversation about what we think is useful content at the moment, and what we think is going to help organisations to come through this period. Nadia, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think what Matthew said about interaction is really key in this, because I mean, we're all sitting at home alone or with our families, and I think we're not I think that the interaction with sort of participatory events sort of like this, or where people can ask questions, or the kind of Q&As or webinars or sort of workshops that we've been hosting, has provided a community and something that people really something that people are sort of craving. We've had lots of really lovely emails and letters to say that their programs had been cancelled, their festivals had been cancelled, but they feel like there are still things going on. And of course, what we are providing is quite niche. I mean, we're providing content from the Arab world to people in the UK. So, there is a special interest in that. So, but I think everything that I agree with everything that Matthew said, but I think that interaction is really key.
Absolutely. Yes, I completely agree, Nadia. I think it's doubly important at the moment. I completely agree around the participatory, around the ability to ask questions, to have a conversation, rather than to interact with something passively as you would with something like Netflix. And I'm not knocking Netflix, particularly not at the moment. I think it's something that we're all probably engaging with more than we would ordinarily. We have a couple more questions coming through on the feed. I'm just scrolling through at the moment to find them. Also, we had some lovely recommendations as we went through. I think I fed back through to you earlier, Nadia, about there was a lovely conversation on the chat about some of the content that you've created. So that's lovely to see that people have been enjoying that. We had a it's not so much a question as just a kind of conversation starter, I think, from Lisa Mead of Apples and Snakes. And this was particularly around the conversation for artists and artist support and what that should look like at the moment. Her biggest concern for them is enabling the poets they work with to come through as best as possible. Because obviously, we've had the conversation around the challenge for artists and freelancers, particularly at the moment. So she was saying they're looking at how they support well-being alongside online programs offering payment. She was saying that she feels they may have taken a little too much time to get going on that, but they're really looking at how they can make it sustainable. And I think that's a really interesting comment at the moment. I think what we're seeing now is that a lot of organisations have curated and created immediate responses over the last couple of weeks. But I think what's particularly interesting for us as a sector is thinking about what this means for us long term. Does this fundamentally change the nature of digital engagement? Does this mean that, exactly as Matthew was saying earlier, what does this mean for national, international content? how can we think about different ways of working into the future? I don't think any of us have the answers for that right now. I just think it's a really interesting part of the conversation.
And just to add to that, Karen, I think that what you're seeing at the moment is people, as you say, have responded quite quickly. You know, and I think that sort of initial testing phase is really, really good and really positive, and it pulls out what works and what doesn't work. But what I would be liking to see now is just how organizations are starting to work in partnership to address these sort of bigger, more fundamental issues around well-being. I mean, it's a point that Matthew's made already during this, but you know, the worry is that there's so much different things being put out there, but it's not being done in a directed way, that everyone's working in sort of separate silos. And it's why those sort of, you know, the support organizations like the Stamp Network for producers are incredibly important in making sure that we can now think about how this is all joined up, how we can together commission potentially at a large scale, but also address issues around health and well-being for artists.
Can I come in there? Yeah. So I mean, I think an orchestra is in quite a fortunate position in terms of the health and well-being of our artists, in that we do have an already formed body of artists that regularly work together, and it relates to a few things Kane was saying as well. Yes, obviously everyone's sort of rushing to get stuff out there. I think we're in this point where, number one, if it's not quite right when you start it, it doesn't matter as much as it normally would do. People are being quite forgiving. But the second thing is that actually, yes, you need that nuanced ask for your funders and so on, but sometimes the artistic and the well-being ideas can be quite simple. And actually, the two best things we have done for our musicians is, yeah, we're obviously trying to get cancellation fees wherever we can to give them some extra money. We're making sure all fees are paid as early as possible for work that was maybe, you know, the payment work wasn't due until the end of the month, things like that. Actually, the two best things we've done for them is set up a WhatsApp group so they can share things on that. And we did the self-employment seminar by Zoom, and 50% of the conversation was social, and that's absolutely fine. And just feeling that they're being connected to people that they're used to performing with is a big thing. And then actually seeing the work we're producing online has been a big thing. Again, about a third of the comments we see on the live streams of that are from musicians, sometimes using the excuse that they're showing it to their 3-year-old child or something like that, or they're with their 80-year-old mother or father. But it's just that fillip of knowing that we as a body are still out there producing, even if it's not me that's doing it. We're still being creative. So it's just really simple stuff quite often can be the most effective.
Absolutely, Matthew. Again, I have to say I agree with you in terms of the content that I've seen. I think often it's the honest, simple, straightforward response, which is the best we can do at the moment.
So, talking of well-being, I'm afraid I'm going to have to go, because one of the things we've set up for the staff we have sadly had to furlough is the twice weekly 15-minute afternoon tea, purely social meetup, which I host, and I'm running late. So that would not be good after talking about mental well-being. Thank you very much. Lovely to see you all. I'm going to have to run, but it's been great to take part in. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Matthew. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So we have got one small comment and then a very quick question. I think that, if you don't mind, just for the sake of expediency, I'm just going to ask of Kane, and then it will be time for our Achates Philanthropy Prize Golden Nugget. So Shubak Festival, and I assume this is Eckhard here, I'm not sure who is representing Shubak today, has said they think that providing value and optimizing your presence is really important, and having a plan is key at the moment. And this feeds into a question we've had from Angelina, who says the initial response has been positive to digital programming. Do we have any advice on how we can sustain and maintain this interest as the online arena becomes increasingly busy? That's quite a big question, but if you have a brief response to that, Kane, we'd love to hear it.
I think it comes to trying to understand the audience who's accessing the digital content that you're putting out, and really responding to what Nadia and Matthew have said is it's not trying to be everything to all people, but being really, really targeted and thinking of how you can continue to serve that community. I think at the same time, you know, I know that Nadia, you know, you mentioned that you haven't yet started asking for donations, but you have made sure that everyone that's joining for your Zoom sessions is signing up to your mailing list. And I think that's a really important thing, that you can then, it gives you a jumping off point to start a dialogue with that audience, to expose them to your wider activity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kane. I think that's some very, very good points. I think just to wrap that up, I think the big message there is make sure that you are following your fundraising best practice. If you're looking at making new contacts, excuse me, how can you maintain and develop those contacts? How can you keep hold of them and not just let them drift off into the ether? So I would like to say thank you very much to Kane, to Nadia and to Matthew for that lovely conversation. We are slightly running over now, so I'm going to just really swiftly hand over to Liv Nielsen, who is from Spectrix. Spectrix are a partner of the Achates Philanthropy Prize, and this is our very first Achates Philanthropy Prize Golden Nugget. Over to you, Liv.
Great. Thanks, Kieran. It's an honor to be here today to represent the Achates Prize for Philanthropy, because it celebrates the inspiring connection between a vital cause and a donor with a strong desire to make a difference for their community. In the last few weeks, I've been asked many times, is now really an appropriate time to ask for a donation? My answer is unequivocally yes. Those of us who work in and support arts and cultural organizations are just their stewards. These gems actually belong to the communities they serve. And if in such a time as this, our organizations truly are at risk and in need of support, it is up to us to make our communities aware that they are needed. And the fact is that people want to help. It's borne out in some new data we've just pulled at Spectrix, which I wanted to share with you. The percentage of orders containing donations has increased 57% from this time last year. The median value of those has increased from £2.50 to £12.50. On average, 30% of customers converting canceled tickets are choosing to donate some or all of the ticket price back to the organization. Some organizations are seeing rates as high as 86%. The average amount donated back for those who do donate is £46. I think you'll agree that this data demonstrates the public's desire to support arts and culture. And I hope it helps you to ask for the support your organizations need. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Liv. That was a fascinating insight into what you're seeing at Spectrix. And lovely to hear you speaking on behalf of the value of fundraising and the value of art. So thank you very much. So we have slightly run over today, so apologies for that, everybody, but I think the conversation has been really interesting, both in the Zoom chat and on the live stream over on YouTube. So I would just like to say thank you very much to all of you for joining us today. So thank you to our Development Director, Kane Moore, for your insights this afternoon.
Thank you everyone for joining today.
And thank you very much to Nadia for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And once again, thank you so much for your little snippet at the end there, Liv. It was great to hear that from you on behalf of the Achates Philanthropy Prize.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So on behalf of Achates Philanthropy, I'd like to thank all of you on the live stream for joining us and for the lively chat we've seen over there. I'm sorry if we didn't get to answer your question today, but obviously we did slightly run out of time. If you do have a burning question you'd like to ask us, as I said at the beginning of the session, do drop that over to us at achatesphilanthropy.com. So it's info@achatesphilanthropy.com, excuse me. The next live online session is the 21st of April at 2 p.m. So do drop us a line over at the info address if you'd like to join that. We will be picking up on some of the topics that we started looking at with our Achates live sessions that were at the Old Vic prior to the COVID-19 crisis. So that session will be led by our director, Caroline McCormick, who will be looking at corporate giving, particularly how to deal with that now in the current context and what we think this is going to look like going forward. So from me, Kerry and Isles at Achates Philanthropy, all that remains for me to say is goodbye and thank you so much for joining all of us today, and we hope to see you back here shortly. Thank you.